doesn't really match your style, does it? Madeline said with a fake smile. Her voice sounded nice, but there was a little meanness hiding in it. Keanu sat by the window quiet. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a soft black jacket. He didn't say anything right away. He didn't need to. The other people on the plane heard Madeline's words. Some pretended they didn't, but they looked at each other quickly, wondering what would happen next. What made this moment even stranger was that this wasn't just any necklace. It was a very old silver pendant, given to Keanu by someone very special, someone he lost a long time ago. The scratches on it told a story of their own. It was something Keanu carried with him everywhere. The silence got heavier. Madeline was still standing there, and she started to realize she had said something wrong. But she didn't want to say sorry yet. Then, in a soft but firm voice, Keanu spoke. It belonged to someone I loved. His words made everyone feel a little uncomfortable. The air in the plane felt heavier. Madeline shifted in her seat, looking unsure. People started whispering. Some took out their phones quietly, thinking this might be an important moment to remember. The plane was still flying smoothly, but inside the first-class cabin, it felt like a storm was happening. Madeline, who had been smiling confidently before, now looked pale. She blinked quickly, trying to find the right thing to say. I didn't mean. I was just... She started, but she didn't finish. Keanu held the pendant between his fingers. His eyes looked far away, as if he was seeing something from a long time ago. It wasn't sadness exactly, but something deeper. It was the look of a man who had loved someone and lost them but still carried that love with him every single day. A young man sitting 2 rows back leaned forward, pulled in by the moment. A woman near the aisle held her purse a little tighter, pressing her lips together. Everyone on the plane suddenly realized something. This wasn't just a famous movie star sitting with them. This was a real person with real feelings, sharing something painful. Finally, Keanu spoke again, his voice soft but strong. This necklace, it belonged to Natalie. She was the love of my life. Madeline opened her mouth, but no words came out. The name Natalie seemed to echo in the small cabin. For a moment, it felt like the whole plane had stopped moving. Keanu wasn't talking to get attention. He never did that. He spoke because this memory had come back and he couldn't push it away. We were young. So young, he said. His voice had both warmth and sadness in it. She gave me this necklace on my birthday. She said it wasn't much, just something small. But I told her it was everything. Someone in the back of the plane gasped quietly. Keanu touched the pendant again, his voice even softer now, like he was talking to himself. We used to talk about the future. About getting married, having a family, living in a quiet little house. She always joked that I would forget all about her once I became famous. A tiny smile appeared on his face, but his eyes shone with unshed tears. Madeline shifted again, uncomfortable. Her face no longer looked confident. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Reeves. I didn't know, she whispered. Keanu gently shook his head. How could you? The young man in the back still had his phone in his hand, but now he wasn't recording. He was just watching, frozen. Keanu took a deep breath. His voice was a little hoarse now. Natalie passed away before we could have any of it. A car accident. Just like that, she was gone. His words hit the cabin like a shockwave. Madeline's eyes filled with tears. The middle-aged woman near the aisle let out a quiet sigh, looking down at the floor. Keanu held the pendant a little tighter for a second, then let it rest against his chest. So I wear this every day. It's not about style. It's about memory. The plane cabin went completely silent. Then Madeline spoke, her voice small and shaky. I'm truly sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. Keanu looked at her for a moment. Really looked at her. Not with anger or sadness, but with kindness. The same kindness everyone knew him for. It's okay, he said softly. We all carry something. You just didn't know what mine was. His words hung in the air, delicate but strong. Madeline's apology was real, but the feeling of Keanu's words would last even longer. The first-class cabin, usually a place of quiet comfort, now felt like something more. A place where people saw each other, truly saw each other for who they really were. Keanu didn't look away. His fingers still rested on the worn pendant. He seemed caught between this moment and a memory. Then, in a voice soft but steady, he spoke again. You know, he said, staring out the airplane window. The last time I saw her, we were standing in the rain. A few passengers leaned in, listening. It wasn't like the movies. It wasn't romantic. It was just real. She was mad at me because I forgot to call her back. I tried to explain that I was stuck on set all day, but she wasn't really mad. She never stayed mad at me for long. The young man in the back, the one who had almost recorded the moment, now just sat still, his phone forgotten in his hand. Keanu's voice became softer, almost a whisper. She laughed, then threw her arms around me and said I was impossible. I told her that if she ever left me, I would follow her anywhere. His jaw tightened for a moment like he was trying to hold back his feelings. His voice broke just a little. I didn't think I'd have to. The cabin was completely silent. No clinking of glasses. No rustling of newspapers. Just quiet, thick and heavy. Madeline's eyes filled with tears she hadn't cried yet. Her words from before seemed far away now, not as important as this moment. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There were no words that could take away the pain she had brought up. Keanu let out a slow breath. A small smile appeared on his lips, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile you make when remembering something precious. She used to call this necklace our little secret, he said, rubbing the pendant in his hand. She said it was a reminder that no matter how far apart we were, a piece of her heart was always with me. A soft sniffle came from somewhere in the cabin. An older woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Even the flight attendant, who had just been pouring drinks, stood still. Her face had changed. She was listening now just like everyone else. Madeline finally found her voice. It was soft, careful. Mr. Reeves, I didn't mean to be rude. I didn't know. Keanu looked at her again. His eyes were kind, forgiving, but still sad. It's okay, he said gently. We all carry something we don't talk about. And just like that, something in the air changed. The plane was still flying high, but for the people in that first-class cabin, it felt like they were somewhere else. Somewhere between sadness and understanding. Between the past and the present. Madeline, still feeling the weight of his words, cleared her throat softly. Would you like anything, Mr. Reeves? Water? Tea? Keanu gave her a small smile. Just water, thank you. She nodded quickly, almost happy to have something to do, something to break the silence. But just as she turned to leave, Keanu spoke again. His voice was quiet but sure. Her favorite drink was green tea, he said. She said it tasted like spring. Madeline stopped for a second, then nodded. I'll bring you some green tea if you want. Keanu gave her a small, tired smile. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And that was enough. As Madeline walked away, the other passengers slowly returned to their own thoughts. But the air still felt heavy, filled with the story they had just heard. Keanu, though, just looked out the window. His fingers held the pendant, lost in a memory that no time or distance could ever erase. When Madeline returned, the only sound in the cabin was the soft clink of the teacup on the tray. The first-class cabin was still quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. Not for the plane to land, but for the weight of Keanu's words to settle. She placed the cup of tea on his table very gently. It's from Japan, she said quietly, her voice softer than before. I hope it's close to what she liked. Keanu's lips curved into a faint smile. It wasn't a happy smile, but one filled with memories. His fingers brushed the edge of the cup, watching the steam curl into the air. For a moment he didn't move, like the simple sight of green tea was enough to take him back to the past. You know, Keanu said softly, still looking at the cup, the first time Natalie made me green tea, she burned it. Madeline blinked. Burned it? He nodded slowly, a tiny chuckle hidden in his voice. She didn't know you had to let the water cool first. She poured boiling water straight onto the leaves. It was so bitter. But she smiled like it was the best thing she'd ever made. His thumb traced the rim of the cup, lost in the memory. I drank every drop. I didn't have the heart to tell her it tasted like grass. A few passengers chuckled softly. Not because the story was funny, but because there was something so real about it. Madeline's voice was gentle. She sounds like she really loved you. Keanu's jaw tensed for a moment. His eyes stayed on the steam rising from the cup. She did, he whispered. And I loved her more than anything. There was something in the way he said it. Not just sadness, but a love so deep, it felt like it was still alive. It pulled the air out of the room, like his love for Natalie wasn't just a thing of the past, but something he carried every single day. A young woman a few seats away, pretending to read a book, wiped a tear from her eye. The man in the back row, who had almost filmed the moment, just stared at Keanu. Not as a famous actor, but as a man who had lost something no one should have to lose. Keanu shifted in his seat. The pendant still rested against his chest. We were going to get married, he said softly. Nothing big. She didn't want a big wedding. Just a small ceremony. She used to say all she needed was me, and maybe a dog. A faint smile tugged at his lips. She loved dogs. Strays mostly. She couldn't stand to see anything alone. Madeline's eyes were filled with tears now. Her heart ached with every word. What happened to her? The question hung in the air, soft, careful. Everyone already knew the answer. Keanu's grief wasn't a secret, but hearing him say it made the pain feel new. Real. He didn't look at Madeline when he answered. Instead, his eyes stared out the window past the clouds. A car accident, he said quietly. She was coming to meet me for dinner. She was running late because she stopped to help a stray dog on the side of the road. Somewhere in the cabin, someone gasped softly. Keanu held his cup so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His voice was quiet but filled with deep sadness. She never made it. The airplane cabin felt like it had stopped moving. The soft hum of the engines was still there, but inside, it was as if time itself had frozen. Everyone in first class sat still, their breath caught in their throats. No one spoke. No one even dared to. Keanu's voice broke the silence again, rough and full of pain. I was waiting for her at the restaurant, he said. I kept checking my phone thinking maybe she was just stuck in traffic. I didn't know. He swallowed hard as if the words were painful to say. I didn't know she was never going to walk through that door. Madeline, the flight attendant, wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The sadness in the air was too heavy for words. Keanu let out a deep breath, but the pain in his voice didn't fade. They found the dog a few feet away from the car, he said, his voice soft but full of emotion. He was still alive. The words hung in the air for a long time. No one moved. No one even shifted in their seats. It was as if everyone was afraid that even the slightest noise might shatter the moment. Then Keanu added, I adopted him. A quiet, poor guy, came from someone in the back of the cabin. A young man who had been holding his phone pressed his hand over his mouth. A woman who had been reading slowly put her book down. Keanu gave a small, sad smile. His name is Max, he said. He's old now, but he sleeps next to me every night. Madeline's voice shook when she finally spoke. She sounds like she was an amazing person. Keanu's eyes softened. The storm inside them was quiet but still there, still present. She was, he said simply. She still is. And just like that, the first-class cabin wasn't full of strangers anymore. It was full of people who, for a moment, all felt the same thing. The same sadness, the same reminder that even the most famous people in the world carry stories of love and loss too. As the plane continued to fly, Keanu sat quietly by the window, his fingers touching an old, worn pendant around his neck. The pendant wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a memory, a connection to someone he had loved and lost. The plane made a soft humming sound as it flew through the clouds, but inside, the cabin was silent. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt empty. It was the kind of silence that happened when hearts were too full, too heavy to speak. Keanu kept looking out the window, his fingers still resting on the pendant. His mind was somewhere far away, lost between the past and the present. Madeline, the flight attendant, stood near his seat. She had asked about his necklace earlier, not knowing the story behind it. Now she didn't know what to say. The sharp, professional attitude she had before was gone. Instead, she stood there with an unspoken apology in her eyes. After a long pause, Keanu spoke again. His voice was gentle but steady. You know, after Natalie died, I didn't think I could keep going, he said. Every place, every moment felt like it belonged to her. I'd wake up expecting to hear her voice, to see her smile. But there was just silence. Madeline swallowed hard, holding back tears. The other passengers pretended to be busy with their books or phones, but they were listening. Every single one of them was listening. Keanu's eyes went back to his pendant. But then there was Max, he said softly, a small, sad smile tugging at his lips. He'd curl up next to me every night just like she used to, and I realized even though Natalie was gone, a piece of her love was still with me. His voice was rough with emotion. Love doesn't just disappear, he said. It doesn't stop because someone is gone. It stays. It changes shape, but it never leaves. A tear slipped down Madeline's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but Keanu noticed. He gave her a small smile, one that was kind but full of pain. I guess what I'm trying to say, Keanu continued, is that people leave but love doesn't. Madeline opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she just nodded, her chest tight with an ache she couldn't explain. Then, something unexpected happened. The young man in the back, the one who had been holding his phone but never recording, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost unsure. Mr. Reeves, I lost someone too. Keanu turned to him, his eyes full of kindness. I'm so sorry, Keanu said softly. Who did you lose? The young man blinked quickly, like he wasn't sure he could say it out loud. My sister, he whispered. A year ago. Car accident. Another wave of sadness moved through the cabin, but Keanu didn't look away. He didn't rush to say something easy or comforting. He just looked at the young man, his eyes full of understanding. What was her name? Keanu asked. The young man's voice cracked. Charlotte. Keanu nodded slowly, like he was letting the name settle into his heart. Charlotte, he repeated, his voice soft as if speaking her name kept a part of her alive. Tell me about her. The young man blinked, surprised. What? Keanu leaned forward slightly. Tell me about Charlotte, he said. What was she like? The young man swallowed hard, but a small, sad smile appeared on his face. She was loud, he said, a little laugh escaping through his tears. Always singing off-key even though she knew she was terrible at it. She loved old movies. And she made the worst pancakes I've ever had. A few people in the cabin smiled softly, but the sadness remained. Keanu's voice was gentle. She sounds amazing. The young man nodded, his eyes red but grateful. She was. For a moment, the two men just sat there. A grieving movie star and a young man with a broken heart, connected by a pain that no amount of fame or money could erase. Then Keanu reached into his pocket, pulled out a small piece of paper and wrote something down. He folded it and handed it to the young man. That's my email, Keanu said quietly. If you ever want to talk about Charlotte or anything, I'm here. The young man stared at the paper, shocked. I don't know what to say. Keanu gave a small smile. You don't have to say anything. Madeline, now openly crying, stepped away to wipe her tears. The other passengers who had started the flight as strangers now felt like they had shared something deeply human, something both sad and beautiful. As the plane began to land, Keanu looked down at the pendant resting against his chest. His voice was soft but sure. Natalie used to say that love doesn't die. It just finds new ways to stay with us, he whispered. I believe that now. And for the first time in a long, long while, Keanu didn't just look lost in his memories. He looked at peace with them. Because love, no matter how fragile or painful, never truly disappears. It stays. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.